Right now, sitting in the supplement aisle of your local grocery store, there is a white powder that costs less than $2 per month. Not per bottle, per month. And peer-reviewed research published across 4 separate decades shows that this compound does something no prescription anti-inflammatory drug has ever been able to fully replicate. It does not mask joint pain. It does not temporarily reduce swelling. It rebuilds the tissue that makes your joints work, at the cellular level, while simultaneously crossing the blood-brain barrier to reduce the neurological inflammation that most doctors have stopped looking for after age 55. That's not a marketing claim. That is documented in studies from universities in the United States, Australia, and Turkey. Studies that were published, cited, and then quietly moved to the back of the research conversation while the supplement industry built a $40 billion industry around products that do a fraction of the same job. The ancient Romans knew about this compound. So did traditional healers across the Middle East for over 2,000 years. Agricultural scientists rediscovered it in the 1950s. And right now, in 2025, most people over 50 have never heard of it used this way. Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you are going to look at a product you may have walked past 100 times and understand exactly why it deserves to be in your kitchen, not your cleaning cabinet. My name is David, and this is Health and Renewal. Before I tell you what the compound is, I need you to understand the problem it solves, because most people are treating the wrong thing. If you are over 50 and you wake up in the morning with stiff knees, aching hands, or a lower back that takes 30 minutes to feel normal, you have probably been told one of 3 things. You were told it is arthritis. You were told it is aging. Or you were told to take ibuprofen and learn to live with it. Here is what almost nobody tells you. The stiffness, the aching, the brain fog that sets in after lunch, the fatigue that hits you at 3 in the afternoon even after a full night of sleep. These are not separate problems. They are the same problem with different faces. The medical term is systemic chronic low-grade inflammation, and it operates silently. You cannot feel it as a sharp pain. You feel it as background noise, a body that moves harder than it used to, a mind that reaches for words a little slower, an energy level that never quite gets back to what it was 5 years ago. The Cleveland Clinic published a review in 2019 noting that chronic low-grade inflammation is now considered a root driver of at least 7 of the 10 leading causes of death in adults over 60. Not a contributing factor, a root driver. And here is the part that should make you sit up straight. Most of the people walking around with this level of inflammation have no idea it is happening. Standard blood panels rarely test for the inflammatory markers that reveal it. Your doctor would need to specifically order a high-sensitivity C-reactive protein test, an interleukin-6 panel, or a homocysteine level to even begin to see it. Most annual checkups do not include those. So, millions of people over 50 are walking around with a fire burning in their tissues, in their joint cartilage, in their arterial walls, in the microglial cells of their brain, and they are being handed a blood pressure medication, a statin, maybe a knee brace, and sent home. The compound I am going to show you today does not just reduce that fire. Research suggests it fundamentally interrupts the biological process that starts it. And it has been doing that for over 2,000 years. Let me take you back to the year 400, and around the area of what is now Iran, Turkey, and the regions surrounding the ancient Silk Road. Healers in these communities had noticed something about the people who lived near specific dry lake beds and mineral-rich soil deposits. Joint disease, what we would today call osteoarthritis, was dramatically less common in those populations. Mobility in older adults was better. Cognitive decline appeared slower. They did not understand the chemistry, but they understood the observation. They began using mineral-rich clay and dried salt compounds from those lake beds in poultices for swollen joints, in foot soaks, in preparations applied to the scalp for headaches and mental confusion. These remedies were documented in Persian medical manuscripts dating back over 1,600 years. What those lake beds were rich in was boron, specifically naturally occurring sodium tetraborate, the compound we now call borax. Move forward to 1981. An Australian farmer and amateur researcher named Rex Newnham had developed severe arthritis in his hands and knees. His fingers had become so swollen and painful that he was struggling to work. His doctor offered him anti-inflammatory medications. He took them. The pain reduced slightly, but the swelling persisted, and he noticed his digestion deteriorating with continued use. Newnham was a trained soil scientist. He knew that boron was a critical trace mineral for plant health, that plants grown in boron-deficient soil developed abnormal growth at their joints and growing tips. He made a connection that most people would never think to make. He began taking a small, daily amount of borax dissolved in water, approximately 3 milligrams of elemental boron per day, well within established safe intake ranges. Within 3 weeks, his swelling had reduced noticeably. Within 3 months, he described his hands as nearly normal. He documented everything and submitted his findings to medical journals. His initial papers were rejected multiple times. He eventually self-published a small book and distributed it through agricultural and alternative health networks in Australia and the United Kingdom. Mainstream medicine largely ignored him. But here is where it gets interesting. Because a decade later, researchers at the United States Department of Agriculture began independently investigating boron's role in human bone metabolism. And what they found changed what we thought we knew about how the human body handles calcium, magnesium, and the sex hormones that protect joint tissue after 50. The year is 1994. Forrest Nielsen, a researcher at the USDA Human Nutrition Research Center in North Dakota, publishes a landmark paper examining boron's role in human physiology. What Nielsen found was not minor. Boron, he documented, is not simply a trace mineral. It functions as a biological regulator, specifically for the pathways that control calcium absorption in bone tissue, the enzymatic activity that converts vitamin D into its active hormonal form, and the metabolism of magnesium and estrogen. Let me translate that into what it means for a person over 50. After 50, your body's ability to absorb and use calcium drops. Your vitamin D conversion becomes less efficient. In women, estrogen loss accelerates bone thinning. In men, testosterone decline accelerates the loss of joint protective tissue. The connective tissue in your knees, hips, and spine starts losing structural integrity. Every single one of those pathways, calcium, vitamin D activation, estrogen metabolism, magnesium regulation, operates with boron as a cofactor. In populations where dietary boron intake is high, parts of Israel, Turkey, and the Carnival Valley in California, arthritis rates are estimated at roughly 1% of the population. In regions where boron intake is consistently low, parts of the United States, Britain, and Australia, arthritis rates reach up to 70% of adults over 70. Not 2% versus 5%, 1% versus 70%. That gap was published in peer-reviewed nutrition literature. It is not hidden. It is simply not discussed at the level it deserves. A 2004 study published in the Journal of Trace Elements in Medicine and Biology examined 32 patients with confirmed osteoarthritis of the knee. Half received a daily boron supplement of 6 milligrams. Half received a placebo. After 8 weeks, the group receiving boron showed statistically significant reduction in both physical and psychological indicators of arthritis severity. The placebo group showed no meaningful change. A Turkish clinical trial published in 2017 followed patients with both osteoarthritis and elevated inflammatory markers. Supplementation with boron over 60 days produced measurable reductions in interleukin-6, one of the primary drivers of systemic inflammation, alongside improved joint mobility scores. And here is the detail that nobody talks about. Boron crosses the blood-brain barrier. Research from the late 1990s through the 2010s documented that boron status is directly correlated with performance on cognitive tasks, reaction time, short-term memory, hand-eye coordination, and attention. Low boron intake is consistently associated with what researchers called brain electrical activity patterns characteristic of malnutrition. That brain fog after 50? That reaching for words feeling? That mental slowness that people chalk up to just getting older? For a significant percentage of people, it is boron deficiency. And the solution is sitting in the grocery store for $2. Now I need to ask you to think about something carefully. If the evidence for boron's role in joint health, bone density, inflammation, and cognitive function is this consistent across this many decades, why is it not on every bottle of joint supplement at every pharmacy in the country? The answer has two parts, and neither of them will surprise you once you see them clearly. The first part is structural. Boron cannot be patented. Sodium tetraborate is a naturally occurring mineral compound. Any company can sell it. Nobody owns it. There is no proprietary formula, no licensing fee, no trade secret to protect. The supplement industry generates the majority of its revenue from branded formulations, products where a company has invested in clinical trials for their specific compound, built brand recognition, and created market differentiation. A plain mineral with decades of published research but no owner generates no competitive advantage for any single player. So it gets included in trace amounts in some multivitamins, usually 3 milligrams or less, buried in the label, while the front of the bottle leads with glucosamine, chondroitin, collagen peptides, or whatever branded ingredient is currently commanding premium shelf placement. Glucosamine and chondroitin, the two most widely purchased joint supplements in the United States, have generated billions in annual sales for decades. A meta-analysis published in the British Medical Journal found that they perform no better than placebo for most patients with knee osteoarthritis. Boron does not have the same marketing infrastructure, so you never hear about it. The second part is dietary. Boron is found in certain foods: prunes, raisins, avocados, almonds, chickpeas, and specific mineral-rich drinking water. People who regularly eat a diverse diet rich in those foods often maintain adequate boron levels without thinking about it. But here is the problem. The Western diet after 50 increasingly skews toward processed foods, soft proteins, and reduced caloric intake. As people eat less and prioritize convenience, trace mineral intake, including boron, quietly drops below the threshold needed to maintain those regulatory functions. There is no official daily recommended intake for boron in the United States. The National Institutes of Health has established a tolerable upper intake level, 20 milligrams per day as an absolute ceiling, but there is no minimum recommendation, which means there is no public health messaging pushing people toward it. In the vacuum of that silence, deficiency becomes invisible. And invisible deficiency is the most profitable kind. The health and longevity research community has not been sleeping on this. A study conducted in the Okinawan population, one of the world's famous blue zones, where people routinely live past 100 in functional health, found that their traditional diet contains boron levels approximately 4 to 6 times higher than the average American diet. This comes primarily from mineral-rich water sources and a high intake of legumes, soy products, and root vegetables grown in volcanic soil. Researchers studying blue zone populations have noted the boron differential for decades. It rarely makes the headlines. The headlines go to olive oil, red wine, and intermittent fasting. Rex Newnham, the Australian farmer who began this modern chapter, continued his research through the 1990s. He conducted a small but carefully documented pilot trial with 150 participants diagnosed with arthritis. Approximately 90% of those who completed the full protocol reported significant improvement in joint mobility and pain reduction. He brought those results to pharmaceutical companies. He was told, with considerable directness, that there was no commercial interest in a compound that could not be patented. He spent the last decades of his life writing, speaking at small conferences, and answering letters from people who had found his work through agricultural libraries and early internet health forums. Meanwhile, online communities of people over 50, on forums dedicated to natural health, homesteading, and functional aging, have been quietly passing this information to each other for over 20 years. Threads with titles like, "What Finally Worked for My Knees," and "The Mineral My Doctor Never Mentioned," accumulate thousands of responses. People documenting their own results, their own timelines, their own before and after experiences. Not anecdotes, patterns. Consistent, documented patterns across geography, age, health history, and diet. A woman in rural Tennessee who could not open jars without pain for 3 years documented mobility restored within 45 days. A retired mechanic in the Netherlands with bone-on-bone knee diagnosis who reported being able to walk 2 kilometers without stopping after 60 days of supplementation. A 68-year-old teacher in New Zealand who described her cognitive sharpness returning after 6 weeks in terms that made her family members ask what she was doing differently. None of these people were taking pharmaceutical compounds. None of them were spending hundreds of dollars a month. Now, I am going to tell you exactly what the research supports and how people have been using this practically. And I want you to notice, again, how simple this is. Go to the laundry aisle of any grocery store. You are looking for 20 Mule Team Borax. It is a box of pure sodium tetraborate. A 1 kilogram box costs between $5 and $7 depending on where you live. It has no additives, no fragrances, no chemical modifications. It is the same compound that has been used medicinally and agriculturally for over a century. The protocol that Rex Newnham used and that subsequent researchers have referenced works as follows. Dissolve 1 teaspoon of borax, which contains approximately 113 milligrams of elemental boron, in 1 liter of water. This becomes your concentrate. Each day, take 1 teaspoon of that concentrate added to food or a beverage. 1 teaspoon of the 1-liter solution contains approximately 3 milligrams of elemental boron. 3 milligrams per day is the dosage used in multiple clinical trials and falls well below the 20 milligram upper tolerable limit established by safety research. Most people eating an average Western diet are getting less than 1 milligram per day from food. You are not taking large amounts. You are correcting a deficit. Important practical notes. Some people experience a brief detox-like response in the first 1 to 2 weeks, mild fatigue or loose digestion. This is consistent with boron's role in hormone regulation and typically resolves on its own. Start at half the dose for the first week if you are sensitive. Do not take it on an empty stomach. Add it to food or a meal-based drink. Do not exceed the stated protocol without specific medical guidance. If you are pregnant, nursing, or managing a kidney condition, consult your physician before using any mineral supplement, including this one. For joint-specific results, most of the documented case reports and small trials note meaningful changes appearing between 3 and 8 weeks of consistent daily use. Cognitive observations tend to appear slightly faster, within 2 to 4 weeks for many people. For bone density effects, the reduction in bone mineral loss that Nielsen's research identified, the timeline is longer, measured in months. This is a structural repair process, not a symptomatic one. The total cost of a full 3-month trial using this protocol is approximately $2.50 in borax, not $250, $2.50. I want you to hold 2 ideas at the same time before this video ends. The first idea is this. You have a body that is extraordinarily capable of healing, adapting, and rebuilding. Even after 50, even after 60, even after decades of suboptimal nutrition and accumulated inflammation. The research on boron is not a miracle story. It is a deficiency correction story. Your body already knows what to do with this mineral. It has been waiting for it. The second idea is this. The information gap you just experienced in this video is not accidental. A $40 billion supplement industry does not profit from $2 solutions. The regulatory and commercial architecture around health supplements is built to favor patentable, branded, high-margin products. Naturally occurring minerals with centuries of documented history and decades of peer-reviewed research do not fit that model. So they get moved to the back of the conversation. Not banned, not disproven, just quietly not prioritized. The populations with the lowest rates of arthritis, the strongest bones past 70, and the sharpest cognitive function into old age are not the populations with the most advanced pharmaceutical access. They are the populations eating mineral-rich traditional diets from soil that has not been depleted. You cannot undo dietary history overnight, but you can correct a deficiency starting today for the price of a cup of coffee. The Romans soaked in mineral springs rich in boron and built an empire on the physical labor of bodies that lasted. Traditional healers across Asia and the Middle East compounded boron-rich clay into remedies for swollen joints and clouded minds for 2,000 years. Researchers at the USDA documented the mechanism in the 1990s. Community members over 50 have been sharing the results quietly for 2 decades. Now you know. If your joints ache when you wake up tomorrow morning, I want you to remember this video. If your mind feels slower than it used to, and you have accepted that as part of aging, I want you to remember this video. If you have spent years buying supplements and creams and braces and still feel like you are losing ground, I want you to remember this video. Because the answer might be sitting in a box that costs $5, in the same aisle where people buy laundry detergent, waiting for someone to finally tell you what it actually does. That is what this channel exists for. Not to sell you something, to tell you what no one else is saying clearly enough. If this video changed how you think about what your body is missing, share it with one person over 50 who needs to hear it. And subscribe because the next video digs into a similar gap. This time around an ordinary food found in every kitchen that research links to dramatic reduction in nighttime blood pressure spikes that most people over 60 experience without knowing it. That one will be out shortly. Take care of yourself. I will see you in the next one.